Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next YouTube video, and what this video is going to be is a kind of follow up to my Search Part 1 review. And what it's actually going to be is the video is going to be called the Search Part 1 Ending Analysis. So basically what it's going to be is, because my review wasn't very I didn't really cover any spoilers or discuss it that much, I'm actually going to really go in depth about what that ending means to us, that big cliffhanger ending at the end of the Search Part 1, what that means for Zuko as a character. So that's what this video is going to be about. And I'm just going to say it right now, this is going to be really spoiler heavy. It's going to include images from the comic itself, images from the show, and I'm just going to go super in depth. So if you haven't read the Search or haven't seen the show, definitely don't continue watching. But if you want to hear my analysis, continue watching. It's going to include all those pictures and stuff like that as we go along. So I'm just going to get straight into it. The ending obviously is that Zuko picks up that letter that was hidden in Azula's kind of a shoe, and it reveals to Zuko, at least what we assume it's true, is that Zuko's actual father is Ikam, not Ozai, so Zuko is not actually a member of the royal family, kind of as such, biologically at least. That's what it suggests to us. Now, I think the first thing to say is that as a literary device, outside of the Avatar universe and what it means for continuity in the show and that sort of thing, it's very successfully done, because it does make you think about Zuko's story and what it means for everything. So in that sort of sense, as a way to end part 1 of the book, it's a very successful device to use. So that's not what I'm arguing today. Now, if the letter turns out to be false, which it could very well be, because Ozai and Azula are clearly planning. They had that 30 minutes together, as the book clearly shows. They had 30 minutes together, and Azula is definitely acting on Ozai's instructions, because she finds a letter, keeps the letter, burns the letter, and that sort of stuff. And because the letter does go through a lot of hands to get from Ursa writing it to Zuko reading it, not to mention there's various different fold numbers, like the letter Ozai reads that is given to him, we assume directly from Ursa, has 2 folds in it, while the letter that Zuko reads has 3 folds in it. Not to mention, Ozai crumpled up the letter when he read it. So, is it a forgery? Is it a duplicate but changed slightly? That sort of thing. There's a lot of stuff that could point towards this letter being false. So, that's the thing. People aren't really arguing about, like, if it's false, that sort of thing, because it doesn't really matter. If it's false, everything that happened in the show remains the same. It's just there to put doubt in Zuko's mind, and that also works. The main thing people are angry about is if it is true, and that's kind of what this video is going to kind of focus on. What it means for Zuko if it is true. And I think people have really complained and focused on 2 main things, which are the 2 things that this video is going to focus on. The first one is that Zuko then has no claim to the throne and shouldn't be Fire Lord anymore, because he's not a member of the royal family biologically. And then the second one is that Zuko's story in Avatar The Last Airbender is now kind of meaningless, because it was very important that he was descended from Roku and Sozin, and that was what caused all of his inner conflicts and stuff like that. I'm going to now analyze both of these kind of claims, I suppose, and say why it's not really as bad as you think. That's the aim of this thing. Obviously, this is just my opinion. I'm going to use a lot of facts here to kind of explain my opinion, but definitely this isn't confirmed. If you're looking for what my opinion actually is, I personally am fine with it. I don't think it's too bad if it is true. I don't mind. It could go either way for me. If it is true, I'm completely okay with it, because as I'm going to explain, I don't think it changes that much for Zuko. If it's false, fine. Everything remains the same, and the comic just had a really good cliffhanger in the opening part. That's my thoughts on it. I'm not too kind of cut up about it like a lot of people are. So let's get into the first thing. That is, Zuko has no claim to the throne. My counter question to that is, if he does not have a claim to the throne, then who does? Because when Aang ends the war in 321, defeats Ozai, he takes Ozai off the throne. no matter what Ozai does, he's not going to become Fire Lord again. He's put in prison, he doesn't have his bending. Basically, he can never become Fire Lord again because he has all the war crimes behind him and stuff like that. Iroh won't take on the role of Fire Lord because he doesn't want it. He does it in the search. He takes the role on temporary for Zuko because obviously Zuko needs to find out about his mother, and he does that because he just needs to do that for Zuko. He won't become the Fire Lord by himself full time. Then Azula. So Azula then would become the natural heir to the throne. She'd be the kind of crown princess, basically. But she's in no fit mental state to take on the throne. We saw in 321 that the second she became Fire Lord, she effectively ruined Ozai's plans, kind of like that. She sent everyone away from the Fire Nation and basically put all the pressure on herself, and then got beaten by Zuko and Katara, which basically ended the Fire Nation threat from the Fire Nation, and it was all on Ozai what he would do. So I don't think any of the other world leaders would really be happy with Azula becoming Fire Lord, regardless of how right or wrong it is. Not to mention, she also has war crimes as well because of what she did helping Ozai. So with none of those three, who are the only other three kind of members of the royal family line, who does it then go to? It has to be Zuko. Or Ursa, I suppose, if she's still alive, because she is technically the other side of the royal family. But since she's kind of missing, we haven't found out what happens to her yet, it has to be Zuko. Because he grew up in the royal family and did everything he could to save the world and his nation as a part of this family, as banished from this family, came back into the family, and all that sort of stuff. He, to all extents and purposes, is a member of the royal family, even if he's not biologically part of it. Basically, and also just a note here, everything I'm saying here is assuming that this thing is true. It may not be, but if it is, that's what I'm going on here. All speculation, just if it is true, what it means. So Zuko pretty much then has to become the Fire Lord, because who else is it going to be? They could maybe elect a new kind of family to become the royal family, but why do that when you already have a hero in Zuko who helped end the war with the Avatar? That's the main thing. And then, going back to the Iroh point about why he won't do it, I don't think Iroh finding out that Zuko maybe isn't a member of the royal family is going to reject what happens here. And this is a quote from the finale. I believe it's the second episode, the Old Masters. Could be the third one, but I can't really remember right now. But anyway, it's Zuko says, and then would you come back and take your rightful place on the throne? And then Iroh replies, no, someone new must take the throne. An idealist with a pure heart and unquestionable honor. It has to be you, Prince Zuko. And then Zuko replies, unquestionable honor, but I've made so many mistakes. Iroh says, yes, you have. You've struggled, you've suffered, but you have always followed your own path. You've restored your own honor, and you can restore the honor of the Fire Nation. So Iroh's kind of thing there doesn't really have anything to do with family. Someone new must take the throne. And if Zuko wasn't at that stage related to the royal family, or wasn't related to him, he probably still would have said that too, because Zuko is the perfect person to become the Fire Lord at this stage. That's what Iroh believes, which is why he fills in for Zuko and is so fills in for Zuko when he's off searching for his mother. So Zuko is the only natural person to stay on the throne. So I really don't think that is anything to be worried about if it is true. Or if it's false, doesn't really matter. Then the second one is obviously a bit more complicated, and that is Zuko's story in Avatar The Last Airbender now isn't as strong, isn't as meaningful, because it was very important to that story that he descends biologically from Roku and also Sozin. He has the main good person in the world, an Avatar, and the main bad person in the world, an evil Fire Lord, and he kind of descends from both of them, and that's why he has such an inner conflict within him. And that was a cool part of his story, but I don't really see it as being so heavily important on biology, because What happened in the show still happened. Zuko never knew Ikem, never knew he had a, never met Ikem, never was influenced by Ikem at all in his life. He was influenced by Ozai. He was influenced by Ursa. He was influenced by Iroh and even his sister Azula. Those were the people who had the biggest impact on Zuko's life. And then obviously meeting Aang and Team Avatar had a huge impact. He was and is part of the royal family, regardless of his biological father. The conflict that he had still happened because he still has that. That happens in the show, and him finding out later doesn't negate that that happened. It just changes a few titles. Ozai is not his biological father, he's just his father. You know, a few things like that. Iroh is not his actual uncle, just his kind of, not his biological uncle, but just his uncle. And in the end, it works out really well for Iroh because Iroh thinks of Zuko as a son, and because he's not kind of his uncle anymore, that kind of almost becomes even closer now because Iroh's almost his adopted son. That's the kind of way it works out. He helps him so much that's almost closer now. Coming back to the kind of main topic, for Zuko, it's always been that debate of is it nature versus or is it nurture? Nature versus nurture. I personally do not buy at all into the nature thing. Because that suggests that people are born evil, born good, born at conflict just because of biology. And I don't buy into that at all. For me, it has to be how Zuko grew up. And for me, that conflict definitely developed as he grew up. His mother had a bigger influence on his life than Ozai. Because if you look at the family in Zuko alone, Ursa has very little to do with Azula. And Ozai has even less to do with Zuko, because in that flashback we really never see Zuko talk to Ozai. Ursa and Azula do talk. Mainly it's Ursa kind of giving out to Azula, but it's definitely the sense that Azula still considers Ursa her mother, though they don't have the best relationship. So that's why Azula has a slight influence by Ursa, which is why she is the way she is in the search. That Ursa does love Azula. It's just Azula has been so influenced by Ozai that that's the way why she's turned out the way she is. And because Zuko was not really influenced at all past being 4 years old by Ozai, he doesn't have that kind of really, really cruel side to him. Even in episode 1 of Avatar The Last Airbender, when he's probably at his worst, he still doesn't have the cruelty because he still agrees to spare a lot of the people in the Southern Water Tribe. He agrees to this honorable thing that if Aang comes with him, he won't hurt anyone. Ozai definitely wouldn't agree to that. Azula probably wouldn't even agree to that. The family at that stage in Zuko alone has effectively split in two, and it could possibly be caused by the revelation in the Search Part 1 of Ozai finding out about this. So Ozai, if he's reading the same letter that Zuko is reading, and it is true, he finds out at that moment, when Zuko is about 4 years old, Azula is about 3 years old, that Zuko's not his son. That basically splits the family in two at this point, or so it seems to appear. And he then focuses on Azula and not so much on Zuko, which explains why it appears that Ozai completely trains Azula in firebending, which is why she's so much better than Zuko, and why Zuko has zero relationship with his father at that point. When Ursa left, you almost get the sense that Ozai was just waiting for a moment to get rid of Zuko and do something to him, which in a way kind of explains even more depth why he so harshly punished Zuko for just speaking out of turn. When, let's not forget, that Azula also spoke out of turn in the second war meeting, and that got no punishment because Ozai agreed with her. So that definitely gives you a sense that Ozai isn't fair. Now, it could just be that he doesn't like Zuko as much as Azula, but that's very important in that he didn't just give out to Zuko for speaking out of turn. He burned him and banished him. And Azula spoke out of turn and was praised for it, basically. So there's something up there. Now, the biggest, I suppose, argument by people as to why it makes this story meaningless and why it's such a bad reveal if it's true is Iroh's line from the Avatar and the Fire Lord 306. And Iroh's line reads, "Because understanding the struggle between your two great-grandfathers can help you better understand the battle within yourself. Evil and good are always at war inside you, Zuko. It's your nature, your legacy, but there is a bright side. What happened generations ago can be resolved now by you. Because of your legacy, you alone can cleanse the sins of our family and the Fire Nation. Born in you along with all this strife is the power to restore balance to the world." Now this is the only line in the whole series, that really suggests that Zuko was born with this battle inside him. And this is why I don't put a whole lot of faith into this line, because this is the only time it's mentioned. Not to mention, does Iroh even at this stage does he know if Zuko is or is not Iroh's son? Judging by the fact that he doesn't seem to know a lot about Ursa and what happened, it suggests that he doesn't know that Zuko's not his son, Ozai's son. So at this stage, he clearly thinks that Zuko is his father, which is why he would say that to him. Now, personally, the reveal actually that he's not actually Ozai's son doesn't affect this too much. It affects the lines nature, born in you, and that's really all. And the fact he says our family, Zuko's only like kind of related to our family. But as I said, family is not just biology, it's more than that. Zuko grew up with these people. They are his family, regardless of biology. And and to further explain this, I think it's important to also, from the same episode 306, to talk about Aang's line at the end. He says at the end, "Roku was just as much Fire Nation as Sozin was, right? If anything, their story proves anyone's capable of great good and great evil. Everyone, even the Fire Lord and the Fire Nation, has to be treated like they're worth giving a chance, and I also think it's about friendships. So the great good, everyone is capable of great good and great evil." I think that kind of almost contradicts Iroh's line that Zuko was born capable of great good and great evil. Azula was the same. Iroh was the same. Ozai was the same. But because of the way they were raised, they turned out differently. They went down one road or another. And I think that kind of means that. That's why I don't put too much faith into that line by Iroh. It's an important line. I like it. I don't think it's really too badly affected by it being true. And then coming back to the thing of like Zuko's inner conflict as very important to his story, I agree. But I've always considered 218, the Earth King, to be the best representation of Zuko's struggle. He has the two dragons kind of battling inside Zuko for influence. And this is kind of physically represented by the fact that Zuko actually gets physically sick because of this kind of inner struggle between good and evil within him. But this inner struggle actually has nothing to do with who he's born from, basically his descendants and stuff like that, who he's descended from. Because this battle is actually between Iroh being the kind of good influence on him and Azula being the bad influence on him. And to me, this is all of Zuko's inner conflict throughout the series. That is always these two dragons battling for influence over him. Like when he was born, the two dragons were probably Ursa and Ozai, and then it developed obviously into Iroh and Azula in Book 2 because the other two weren't present. So that's what I put a lot of faith into, that representation, because it was actually shown to us. It wasn't just Iroh telling Zuko something, it was actually shown to us that this is what's happening within Zuko. So, to kind of summarize, Zuko grows up raised by Ursa and Ozai, descendants of Roku and Sozin respectively, but Ursa has the bigger influence on Zuko, while Ozai has the bigger influence on Azula. Which is why the search is kind of setting up Azula's inner conflict between Ozai's influence on her and Ursa's influence on her. For the most part, she's driven by what Ozai tells her to do. That she's trying to get Zuko off the throne, and then only a few times does she see the visions of her mother saying she loves her, because she only heard that a few times in her childhood, probably. So that's what I really like. I don't put much, if any, stock into the nature thing, because it especially with Azula here, it's definitely pointing towards nurture being one of them as well as for Zuko. Um, Again, I'll say family is not just biology. To Zuko, Ikem may have been his biological father, but he never knew him. Zuko's father was and is right now Ozai. He may meet Ikem and get to know his biological father and really kind of accept that, but as far as we know, he's never met Ikem. He has met Ozai. Ozai's his father. That's the big thing. Um, Now, again, this is all assuming that that big reveal is true and that for sure, 100% Zuko is not Ozai's son. Personally, I'm leaning towards it being false and it's part of Ozai's plan that Azula's executing out in the open. But I will be okay if it is true because, in my opinion, it doesn't change Zuko's story much. It adds a lot of layers to the story in that, the whole uncle thing, it brings those two closer. I think it explains a lot of Ozai's treatment of Zuko in the past, and maybe why Azula is so heavily influenced by Ozai, yeah, and stuff like that. But yeah, that's my main kind of point. I haven't covered absolutely everything, but I did use a lot of evidence from the show, and it's definitely, as I say, I don't even feel I need to say this, but obviously this is just my opinion. This is what I'm adding to the discussion. I'm not angry about anyone's thoughts on this or anything like that. This is just my thoughts on it. Zuko does have a claim to the throne. His Avatar: The Last Airbender story is not meaningless. I think this just adds so much more to it. And most of all, as I said at the start, it was a very successful cliffhanger. Everyone's talking about this in the Avatar fandom. Even people who don't like the comics are discussing this. The problem is that people are getting very emotional about this because they have a big kind of I suppose they were very heavily impacted by Zuko's story, but definitely just analyze it. Think about it before you type anything out or talk to anyone. Really, really think about it. I'll end by just saying definitely check out the Avatar Online podcast, episode 43, where myself and four people from the site, Kelly, Callum, Peter, and Rich, we just absolutely discussed this book to death. We nearly 3 hours of discussion on this book. It was amazing, pretty much. We had some funny moments, some really in-depth moments. It's a really good podcast, episode 43. We go through the book page by page, scene by scene, and then have a big kind of speculation stuff about basically what this video is about at the end. So definitely check that out. So thank you for watching this video, and bye.